a more matriarchal leadership model, the most caring thing that a leader can do is tell the truth. And the truth can be very uncomfortable. The truth can be very difficult to put a voice to, right? Welcome to the Glow Up Revolution podcast, a podcast for overgivers, overachievers, and the strong ones in the room. We discuss everything from neuroscience-based burnout prevention to magic spells we can cast for upcoming job opportunities and everything in between. Welcome. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Glow Up Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Megan Winkler, and today we're talking about compassionate leadership and the fact that it isn't nice. So let's just dive in. I think that compassionate leadership has a little bit of a stigma because it sounds very feminine, when in reality, I think it's the way that we should all be leading, right? But we have this problem with toxic leadership, that like masculine leadership hangover that we've talked about before here on the podcast. And so like many things that isn't go, 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 do, 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 or some like militaristic pseudonym, metaphor, it gets a little bit of a bad rap, right? So if you say the words compassionate leadership in a boardroom or even some coaching circles, it immediately brings to mind this picture of a woman who is docile and meek and too nice to make a hard call. I actually saw something on Instagram recently, and it was two women talking about how women are used in a corporate setting. And they were talking about how you can actually see this pattern of when a company is in trouble, they will assign, elect, however it works, with their board or stockholders or whatever, or hire a CEO who is a woman, because they kind of think it's going to hell in a handbasket anyway. So why not just put a woman in charge and she can take the fall? Right? So women are always, almost always down prioritized and allowed to be the scapegoat for a lot of things in corporate America. And unfortunately, this has filtered into entrepreneurship. Now, I also saw a really cool metric that said 40% of business is currently owned by women. And so what that is actually telling us, because that's growing, is that more women are striking out on their own. They are building their businesses. They are stepping up. They are taking control of their careers and their finances and all of that. And they're paving the way for a better future for all of us, honestly. And at the same time, I know that some of us have internalized some of these stories from corporate America. We've brought them into our business. And the idea that, if you're too focused on people or on how people feel, that you aren't really focused on the results. And that's simply not true. And so you may have made yourself a little smaller when it came to your compassionate leadership tendencies, not because that's not who you are, but because that's downvalued, right? So you edit it out. It doesn't fit, right? And so much of what we do in the business world is really like, how do we fit? Do we, slide into this comfortable spot? Do we come out and do something really controversial and against the norm to stand out from competitors? Like, what is it? What is it? So I want to look a little bit at the history of the matriarchy, because I firmly believe that compassionate leadership is a matriarchal characteristic, and it is something that we can do where we are taking care of those who need us, when we are taking care of those who maybe are less fortunate. We're taking care of people with disabilities, any way they look, but we're also taking care of the collective regardless, right? It's not every man for himself. It is every person working toward a goal together, right? So before we had the corporate org charts and performance review cycles, archaeologists and anthropologists have actually documented matrilineal lines and societies that have inhabited every single continent. So these are cultures where leadership was not centered on domination, but rather stewardship, right? We're working for the community, for every person in the community. We're not leaving anyone out, no matter what. These are societies in which the most powerful person in the community was not one who accumulated the most, but the one who ensured that everyone had enough, the one who took care of everyone else. So we have two really interesting examples of this matrilineal matriarchy kind of format in civilizations that have been around for sometimes centuries. So first, I'm going to introduce you to the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and I hope that I pronounced that correctly. It is one of the longest running democracies in human history. It is a confederacy of native tribes in northeast the United States and southeast Canada, so that whole area. And so this confederacy, all the tribes give clan mothers the authority to select and remove chiefs. The lines through which families are identified are actually through mothers. And traditionally, the tribes in this confederacy actually lived in mothers' houses. So you would have families that were a mother and her sisters, and like their husbands would come live with them, and then all of their kids would live there. And then when their daughters got married, their sons-in-law would come live with them. And then when their sons got married, their sons would go live with their wives' families. But the loyalty all remained with your mother's family. It's so interesting. Another thing that I found super interesting about the culture is that in these tribes, oftentimes children would call all of the mothers mother. So you had one child who could have 5, 6, 7 different mothers, and it didn't matter because it was all about taking care of the children, the smallest and weakest of the tribe, right? So another culture and civilization, I think we could say, society, is the Minangkabau of West Sumatra. Again, apologize for any butchering of names. This is actually the world's largest matrilineal society, still thriving today. I actually learned about this society when I was taking my psychology of sex course in my undergrad. One of the most awkward starting classes, and then end up being like my favorite after the 16 weeks. But I was so struck by this matriarchal society because they organize land, they organize their inheritance and governance through the female line. And the decision-making process goes through collective deliberation. So until they meet a consensus, a final decision is not made. And this is not a lack of power, but this is the understanding that sustainable decisions require that sustainable and collective buy-in, right? And these societies are still thriving today. This is evidence that a matriarchal approach works. This is evidence that compassionate leadership works. And none of these systems are naive. None of them pretend or pretended that hard decisions didn't exist. They don't pretend that conflict is not a thing. And they completely recognize that, you're going to have some infighting. You're going to have conflict. You're going to have the hard stuff, right? Like there's no way to prevent human nature. We're going to want what we want and we're going to fight for it. But what they do have is there's compassion and consensus and community focus. Compassion is a structural trait of the matriarchy. It is baked into how decisions get made and how resources get allocated and how accountability is held by individuals and the leaders. Compassion in this context really means I'm responsible for the well-being of the whole, not just the performance of its parts. You could also say I'm responsible for the well-being of this whole, not just myself, right? The United States was founded on a lot of ideas that, well, they probably didn't even make sense for the time, but they certainly don't make sense now. that whole like rugged individualism, self-made man kind of thing. You never hear self-made woman. It's always self-made man, and it's really for a person to get out and get as much stuff and as much money and as many resources as possible for themselves. It's just how it is. So let's dig a little bit into what compassionate leadership actually looks like, because this is not a history lesson. I want you to be able to apply it to today. So compassionate leadership in practice requires three things that are genuinely difficult sometimes. One is radical honesty. In a more matriarchal leadership model, the most caring thing that a leader can do is tell the truth, and the truth can be very uncomfortable. The truth can be very difficult to put a voice to, right? But what I love about speaking truth, or speaking truth to power when the situation calls for it, is that speaking truth about a situation respects all of the people involved. It respects the person enough to say, this isn't working. Right? So compassionate leaders don't ghost anybody. Compassionate leaders are not passive aggressive in any way. They are also not using kindness as a way to cushion the blow. Or maybe I should say they're not using niceness. So several years ago, I really dug into the difference between kind and nice. And nice is what we have all been taught to do and be. We're nice. This is how phrases like, bless your heart, got so popular in the South, because we're being nice while saying, oh, what a fucking idiot you are. Neither one of those things is kind. Kind would be, oh, I'm seeing you're having trouble with this. Can I help? That's not the easiest thing to do, right? Because A, you're calling out an issue, but B, you're also like volunteering your time and energy. Eek. Conflict avoidance is not kind. Conflict avoidance is not empathic. It is not compassionate. It is a stalling tactic. Real compassion says, I care about you enough to have this conversation, and I care about what we're building together enough to not let it slide. And it says that directly, without any cruelty, without any ego, and also unapologetically, so without an apology. Okay. The second is accountability without punishment. We're big on punishment in our current society, right? So this one kind of feels counterintuitive to Americans and maybe other people in different parts of the world. Most of us learn that accountability is part of a punitive system. So if you fail, you're shamed. If you fall short, you're made to feel like the problem. But in more matriarchal governance structures, accountability is looked at differently. So it's not so much about punishment, but it's about restoration. So in the Confederacy that I mentioned before, a lot of times children were disciplined by having water thrown on them because they were cleansing away the bad behavior. Now, I'm not saying that's what they're doing now. I don't know, but historically speaking, and I got it from the website of the Confederacy itself. And it was about restoration. It was about cleansing. I am trying not to mispronounce the name repeatedly, and I realize as I'm saying the Confederacy sounds really bad. So we're going to say the People of the Longhouse Confederacy, because that is what the name actually means when translated into English. So in matriarchal governance structures, we're looking at that accountability also through the lens of, what does this person need to understand? What does the community need in order to repair and move forward? A beautiful practice that is a closed practice, by the way, is the Ho'oponopono practice that is used by the Hawaiian people and is led by a spiritual leader, in which the person who is at fault says, I'm sorry, thank you. I'm sorry, forgive me, thank you, I love you. And it's said over and over again because it's part of being a member of the community. Now, The tradition in which this practice comes from is not necessarily matrilineal, but it is an example of a matriarchy led value, right? So I think one of the big misconceptions that people have is it's like, oh, the matriarchy is just the opposite of the patriarchy, where all the women are in power. And it's like, no, 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 it's not that. It's that we're not centering men anymore, but we're not centering women. We're centering children. We're centering the future. We're centering the earth. We're centering the human race as a whole and our progress toward the future. So this accountability, while looking at what the community might need in order to move forward, is harder than punishment. As a kid who got spanked, it was real easy to spank me. It would have been a lot harder for my mom to sit down and say, what happened? How do we move forward? What's the impact on the family? How can we grow together? Yep. It's harder to say you made a choice that caused harm and I still believe in your ability to do better. But how compassionate is that? It's beautiful. So, so beautiful. The third is long horizon thinking. So again, like I was saying, it's very future thinking. It's looking at humans and our future collectively together. The Longhouse Confederacy concept of 7-generation thinking asks, what are the consequences of this decision, not just for today, not just for this quarter, this year, but for people who inherit what we build, for 7 generations. When you apply that to business, to the culture that you're creating, even if you are just a solo business owner and it's just you and your clients, when you ask what you're building for generations after you, it shifts everything about what you're doing day to day. Suddenly you're like, oh, that Instagram post has more importance. Oh, that email has more gravitas, right? It switches and changes how you make decisions. It means that you don't optimize for a short win. And you certainly don't optimize for a short win at the cost of a long relationship. We're seeing that a lot right now with our current presidential administration and all of the billionaires. They are absolutely gutting businesses. They are firing humans and putting AI in its place. Much to their own detriment, by the way, because AI doesn't do as good a job and AI is more expensive than humans, that we're doing a much better job. So there's that. But we're seeing this. We're seeing them kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean style plundering businesses and structures to make a fast buck, make that short win. You don't have to sacrifice a person's dignity, including yourselves, to make a deadline. You don't have to build a brand on a value that you can't actually live 7 days a week. It's so demanding if you try that. So I want to speak directly to the person, the woman who edited her compassion out. You are a compassionate person. You experience compassion. You worry about people in the world. You worry about people on the other side of the globe from you. You have compassion. But sometimes when you come into a business setting, you kind of let that take a back seat because you learned early, sometimes even in the classroom as a kid, that showing how much you care can be turned into a weakness. That your instinct to check in on people, to slow down and ask questions, like, was frowned upon, like made you a bad leader. I want to tell you something. You are not wrong about leadership. You are actually right about leadership, and you are in the wrong system, or were in the wrong system. Any system that tells you being compassionate, caring about the people on your team, your coworkers, people you work with, people you contract with, whatever, any system that tells you that that's insufficient and you should not be doing that is wrong. Any system that tells you you're slowing down, you're too feelings-based, you're too focused on people and not the bottom line, that system is wrong. I'm calling it out. Just because these systems have endured doesn't mean that they're the right way to do something. My son has this sticker on the back of his truck that says something like, just because it's always been this way doesn't mean it always should. Right? So when we're looking at how we can change things on a micro level that then impacts the macro level, and the things that they don't put in leadership books, quite honestly, and they never really talked about in my MBA program, for example, unless it was to point out where women were challenged in the workplace. It's never been a model to aspire to, and I think that changes now. Because your empathy is not a defect. Your compassion is not a stumbling block. Your discomfort with decisions that sacrifice people for metrics is not naivete. It is not you being childish. It is not you being idealistic either. The version of you who leads from that compassionate place, that version is not someone you become. She is actually someone you've always been. She's been waiting very patiently and waiting for you to stop apologizing for her. So this wraps up the last of my Divine Feminine Leadership series. And, you know, when I set out to do these 8 or 9 episodes, I didn't do it to give you a new framework to implement. I did it as a way for you to tap back into that inner wisdom and that inner knowing that I know you have, the one that says, I can do this differently. Things can be different. I built it because I have seen so many women over the years, extraordinary women who lead from a silent exhaustion with the attitude of like, well, I'll just get through it. I'll just do it. It's fine. And so I wanted to offer you something different. It is a strategy, yes, but more than that, it is a return to yourself and a return to leading in a way that is older than hustle culture. It is older than corporate leadership theory. We've talked about the goddess archetypes. We've talked about societies that have been around for centuries and everything in between. If you love this series, if you want to learn more, I want to invite you to the She Disruption program. It's an 8-week leadership program for women who are ready to lead differently. I'm going to have all of the information in the show notes below, and I would love to invite you in. And if you would like, I would love to have you in my Patreon. You can join for free, and as little as $3 a month, you actually get weekly updates, a little tarot card and astro update. And you also get access to my private circle community. So we're off social media, and that community is for my paying clients or my paid Patreon members. So that's a little extra incentive there. You get additional weekly focus thoughts and access to a lot of other really cool stuff inside the community. And I'm building that out even bigger. So I'm excited to see where that goes. Again, that's in the show notes, as is my email address. Feel free to reach out to me anytime with any questions you might have, any topics for suggestion. And I'm looking forward to switching gears with you just a little bit next week, moving forward. Not sure what I'm going to talk about, but I guarantee you're going to enjoy it. So thank you again so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you to my paid and free Patreon members. Y'all are my little inside scoop people, and I just adore you. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time, my friends, stay hydrated, stay safe, and as always, of course, stay magical. I'll see you next week.